Now you had an interview, and I was just posting it again with Stephen A. Schwartz, the world-renowned remote viewer. And in the interview, I was really interested to listen to it again. He asked, and you answered, very well, but within that short framework, the questions could be expanded on. Two of his questions that he said he did not know the answer to are what is consciousness and what is information? Could you expand on those a little bit and
Sure.
offer a little more
Yeah.
rounded information on that?
Well, what is consciousness is simple. Consciousness is awareness with a choice. That's just a very simple definition. Now, it's got a lot of logical consequences to those words, just a few words, awareness with a choice. But what is awareness? Awareness, it means that you are aware of something. You're aware of this or aware of that. And basically, what that means is information. What you're aware of is information. What am I aware of right now? Well, I'm aware that I'm sitting in front of a computer monitor and it's got my picture and your picture and we're talking to each other, and that's what I'm aware of. But all of that is gathered by my senses. My sight gets, photons come from the screen, they go to my eye, they go to my retina, they get turned into nerve pulses, and I interpret them as this reality. So that's kind of the physical viewpoint. Okay, that's the physical viewpoint. Now, if you go up to the bigger picture, the bigger picture is that there's this virtual reality. And the character I'm playing is Tom Campbell. The character you're playing is Donna Vinny, and we have both come to sit down and have this talk and answer people's questions. And we're both pieces of consciousness. We're both free will awareness units who have been working with these avatars for over 70 years. So anyhow, so that's another way, to look at what's going on. If you look at an even higher picture now, you step it up one more, then basically we're pieces of a larger consciousness system that has created these subsets of itself so that they can interact with free will to create more possibilities of what can happen, what it can grow into. And that's part of its evolution. So awareness is about information. What you're aware of is information. Now, it's also interpretation, your interpretation of the information. Okay, so that's what creates your reality, is your interpretation of the information you get. Here we have 5 senses. With our intuitive side, we have a lot more. We're not limited to just the information we get through our 5 senses. We have all sorts of other kinds of information available to us on the intuitive channel. You see, so consciousness is an information system. It gets information, it interprets that information, and that interpretation is what it calls reality. So that's basically the idea of what is consciousness. So the other thing I'd have to say about consciousness is that consciousness has time inherent in its definition, because if it has a choice, then there's always a before and after. Before the choice, after the choice. So you have to have time or you can't have choice. To be able to make a choice, there has to be time. Before the choice, after the choice. No time, no choice. Now, that means if you have choice, then it has to be a free will choice, because that's the only kind of choices there are. The opposite of free will is determinism. And in determinism, everything's determined. There are no choices. Everything's done already. There's nothing to do. There's no growth. There's no change. There's no evolution. There's just everything that is, and it stays that way forever, period. So it's the null set. There's nothing happening there. It's dead. It's a dead thing. There's no growth, because growth requires time. You grow up. Now you were less grown up. Now you're more grown up. You see? So you need time. And if you're going to make a choice, the only choices there are is free will choices. So when I say that consciousness is awareness with a choice, I've also defined that part of it is time, part of it is free will. They just come in with the choice. Okay. Information itself, I've used information a whole lot here in the definition of consciousness, but what is information? Okay. Think of an information system with bits, and a bit is just a name for the smallest piece of information. Okay, so however this information system works, we can go down to its smallest unit of information, and we'll just give that the name a bit. Okay, now if all the bits are random, then there is no information. If you order some bits, in other words, put the bits in a particular way, make it unique. They're not random, they're in this particular way. You've created information. Those bits now they could represent something. They could stand for something. They could be the number 6. They could be a metaphor for something. You've created information. So information is developed by ordering bits to have meaning, some sort of meaning. That's how information works. Bits with meaning. Now, consciousness can have information. Consciousness can deal with information. It takes in information, it then can assess that information, can make choices, and then it can output information. Okay, it's an information system. Information can only exist in a consciousness. You can't put information in a jar. Information is non-physical. Okay. Now, the information is the content, the meaning. Remember, we took all those random bits and we made some order out of it, built a little pile of bits and said, okay, that little pile of bits, we'll call that a tree, and that'll be what the name for that little pile of bits is. We'll make up a name for it. And now we could make up another tree, and then we could count. We could say, oh, look, 1 tree, 2 trees. 1 + 1 = 2. And now we start understanding mathematics. So it grows. You see, it evolves. The information is not, let's say, in a book. Okay, we don't have a book. A book is full of information. Well, we say that, but that's a real loose form of the word. We're not being too specific. We should say a book is full of data. Okay, because data can be transmitted, it can be received, it can be transmitted. Okay, that's data. Information is not the ink or the paper that make up the book. The ink and the paper are the media. And the media can be ordered in such a way that they represent data. Okay, so the book is full of data that have been incorporated into a media, and they are physical. The ink takes up space. The book has mass. You can put them in a jar. You can measure them. But the meaning of those bits, that requires a consciousness. So look at that, and because of its experience, it can say, oh, yeah, that's the bump I made for a tree. Oh, look, there's 10 of them. There's 10 trees. What does that mean? Well, 10 trees by itself might not mean much, but you see, we could keep going on and build up a village and build up an environment. And we could do all kinds of things with that where they all had meaning. All these things that we're doing would have their meaning. So the meaning, the significance, the content can only be understood by a consciousness. It can't be understood by the paper in the book, can't be understood by the ink in the book, can't be understood by even the cover of the book, right? You actually have to go in and look at the data and convert it into information in a mind, in a consciousness. So information is really different than data. So let's say, how do we deal with things? Well, I get data when you send me a book, or I get data when light goes off the screen and goes into my eyeball. I get data when I see lights over here and a clock on the wall and drapes across the window. That's data. Okay, now I take that data and I turn it into, oh, this is my studio. Okay, now that's a consciousness doing that. So the data is transmittable. So, okay, I get that data and I look at it and I say, okay, I recognize all that data. And altogether, that's my studio where I talk and do interviews. Now, I'd like to explain. I'd like to describe to somebody else what my studio looks like and what I do there. So, what do I have to do? I have to take that information that understands that this is my studio, and I have to convert it into data. And that data may come out as words, little acoustic vibrations that go into somebody's ear and turn into neural activity in the sound portion of the brain. I have to create into data. And then I send that data to somebody, and they get the data, and then they interpret it. And they look at it and they say, well, it looks like a room, and it's got a curtain on the window, and there's a clock up there, and so on. And they may say, gee, it looks like it's a good bedroom. So they look at it and say, oh, I interpret that to be a bedroom because I didn't put the data in about my computer and the screen and all of that stuff I left out. You see, I didn't bother with that. So they look at it and they think it's something else. They think, well, it looks like a bedroom to me. Well, of course, it was a bedroom that was converted into a studio. So the thing is, that's the way we communicate. And it's interesting to know that when you get data, you have to interpret it. And that data is not necessarily a perfect representation of what was intended by the consciousness. Because when I take my knowledge and I turn it into data so that I can share it, it's not a perfect thing. But language isn't perfect. There's a lot of things that language just has a hard time describing. There's a lot of emotions and a lot of feelings and a lot of things that it's just hard to put into language. So you do your best you can to put it into data, but that's not, you don't get 100% of it. Maybe you get a 98%, maybe you capture half of it. I didn't capture all of it when I described my room because I left the computer out. So you don't always get a full picture. So the other person takes data that has inherent errors in it. I shouldn't say errors, maybe I should say omissions in it. And I then interpret it. And when I interpret it, that means my consciousness comes to some kind of conclusions what it is. And I say, oh, it's a bedroom. Okay, that must be a bedroom in his house someplace. I wonder who sleeps in there. And then I want to tell somebody else about it. So then I take what I've got and I put it into data so that I can send to somebody else. So I send them data, voice, picture, whatever, and they get that data and they have to interpret it. And you see how that goes on? So there's errors everywhere. The data you get comes with errors, comes with omissions, comes with less than the whole truth. You take it and you interpret it based on your history, on your fear, on your beliefs, on your love, all those experiences you had. You interpret that data based on in terms of your experience base. And if your experience base has only been things physical, then you interpret that data into things physical. Oh, curtains, clocks, ceilings. I'm familiar with that stuff. I know what that is. I got a pattern match for that. So I interpret it. But if it's not similar, if you don't have that in your experience base, you don't know how to interpret it. You may interpret it very strangely. You might say, oh, there's something wrong. I don't know what it is, but, I seem to be surrounded in something, but I have no idea what. I'm trapped.
Did that
You know,
happen to you when you viewed things in other realities that were not like here?
sure, Sure.
How did
You
you
can't help
deal with
that
that?
the best you can. You come up with the best pattern match you can, and that's what you go with. It may or may not be correct, but with experience, you get better. The more experience you have, then the better your experience database, the more likely is you can find a decent pattern match. But when you run into things that are just not at all like you've ever experienced, you guess. You say, well, that was sort of like this. So then that's what it is in your mind. So that's in your mind, that's what the reality was. It was like this. Might not have been like that at all, because your database may be lacking in trying to understand that. It may be something else entirely. But in your reality, it's that, because that's your closest approach to it. I and MBT Events hope you liked this video. We will continue to post videos for free on my YouTube channel, but please understand, these videos are expensive to produce. They represent many thousands of hours of production and editing, as well as all the necessary audiovisual equipment, computers, and software. If you find something of significant value in our videos, please consider supporting their production through our Patreon account or through a one-time donation. It would be very much appreciated. The links are in the description below. Thank you.